Last Airbender live action is bad. Okay, I have to admit, this one's personal. Very personal. And I've been putting this video off for a while. I watched the entire season in the first 3 days that it was out, and I gleaned very little joy from it. It makes me angry, and after watching the show, I realized that talking about it would just be revisiting that anger. But alas, here I am, ready to rant. If you enjoy this show, that's perfectly fine, but I'm going to tell you why you're wrong and dumb. Okay, all jokes aside, I'm incredibly biased in this instance. I love the original show. It's on the very short list of shows and movies that I consider to be perfect. 10 out of 10. It has incredible and iconic characters, with some of the best character work I've ever seen. The premise is original and creative, the world building is spectacular, the animation is top-notch, the writing is subtle and smart, and ranges from hilarious to gut-wrenchingly sad and heartfelt. And the character arcs are fucking fantastic. The original show is almost too good. It should be illegal for a show to be this solid all the way through. So the main question that comes to my mind is, what is the purpose for the live-action adaptation's existence? Like, seriously, what is one reason that this show needed to be made? Oh, it's purely a nostalgia bait cash grab written by people who completely misunderstand the source material? Oh. What else is new? Fair warning, this video might be a little unhinged, because this show is truly offensive to me. Now, usually I don't like to constantly compare adaptations to the source material, but this is a special case. You see, generally, adaptations come in the form of a different medium than the original, or have lots of time in between them, allowing for the story to be updated for the times, so to speak. Or maybe the source material isn't considered to be very good, so the writers of the adaptation have a lot to work with in terms of making the story or characters more enjoyable. The obvious example of this is The Boys. The show is pretty much universally loved, while the comics are basically universally hated, because the show adds subtlety and depth to an otherwise empty story. The strange thing about Netflix's Avatar is that none of these are the case. The show is in a new medium, but live action is a much worse medium for Avatar than animation was. Even though a lot of the effects are executed well, live action just doesn't work nearly as well for the concepts in this show. The cartoon isn't that old and has a timeless setting and cast, so there's not really much to modernize. Well, the writers seem to disagree with me on that point, but we'll talk all about that when we get to the characters. The original show has legitimately amazing writing. Every character has a masterful arc throughout the show, and there's so much subtlety in how character interactions are handled. Not to mention the emotional moments and story build-up. There are 3 moments in this show that make me cry like a little baby every single time I watch the show. I have seen this show like 10 times in my life. So you may ask, how can this adaptation possibly improve upon or even live up to the writing of the original? The answer obviously is that it can't. In fact, the exact opposite. Every character trait, every charming moment, every funny joke, every fun, conceptually interesting, creative side quest, all of it is gone. No, I'm not exaggerating, but I really wish I was. So now let's talk about all the ways the writers misunderstand the source material. Unfortunately, the first issue becomes clear from the very first moments of the show. The pacing. The pacing of this show fluctuates between batshit insane and mind-numbingly slow. There is no in-between. And the first glimpse of this is in the beginning moments of the first episode. For context, the cartoon opens with Sokka and Katara bickering, Sokka establishing to the audience that Katara is a waterbender. Katara lashing out at Sokka for being a jackass and accidentally freeing Aang from his little Captain America iceberg with her waterbend. The show has just started, and we get good characterization for Katara and Sokka. We learn that Katara is a waterbender, and we're introduced to Aang. The pacing of the cartoon is perfect. It balances character moments and plot progression in a very engaging way. Then you throw in the fact that the intro sequence to the show explains the general state of the world and basic lore in a concise and easy to understand fashion, and you have yourself a gripping pilot episode. Every episode of the cartoon is 20 minutes long, barring the 4-part finale. And that includes the pilot. Quick summary, the pilot introduces the entire concept of the world, the entire main cast of the characters for Book 1, explains the backstory of the Water Tribe, introduces Zuko and Iroh, and fits great character moments that show us what type of people our main characters are, all in 20 short minutes. And it doesn't feel rushed, it feels perfectly natural. Let's compare that to the first episode of the live-action show. So, we open with a flashback. Oh boy. A flashback and a fight scene. Yes, the adaptation of the show that I can't stop praising for its subtlety, character moments, and pacing opens with a cool fight scene. And then we immediately see Sozin fuck the super interesting episode in Book 3 where Sozin is introduced fully. Let's just have him show up in the first minute of the show. Why not? Then we cut to Katara and Sokka, who are really fucking lame in this show. Any glimpse of the hot-headed, motherly, strong, and caring Katara is completely gone. She's just like shy and quiet and nice. I don't know. That's pretty much all of her character traits in this show, if you can even call them that. But whatever, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Sokka and Katara lose their boat, so Katara calmly tries to waterbend the boat back over in their direction, but in doing so, she accidentally sets off a nuclear bomb. Bada bing, bada boom, the Avatar is here. And then for some reason, Zuko has these little Avatar statues on his shelf. I'm assuming they're from the shrines, and they start glowing. So he's like, OMG, the Avatar is close by. So then I thought, oh, maybe they aren't going to do the big Kamehameha blast into the sky. But no, they still do it, and Zuko goes out and looks at it. I don't know, it doesn't really matter, it's just a really pointless change and I thought it was weird. Then we get to see another flashback to Aang being told he's the Avatar, which is in the original show, but the problem here is that it's shown way too early. The cartoon has Aang avoiding talking about the painful parts of his past until he's directly confronted by them, which is way more interesting. We also get introduced to the all-knowing exposition machine, or as you may know her, Gran. She looks at Aang for 1 second and is like, that random child you guys found in an iceberg is the last surviving airbender and also the Avatar. She also reads the iconic intro sequence, but this time it's really cringe because this actress is just not doing a very good job, and the scene is also way too long. Then Aang is just told by Gran that the airbenders are extinct, and he doesn't seem to care that much. He's just like a little bummed. My face when I find out my entire people were killed in a mass genocide. This is the first of many shocking examples of this show blowing its load way too early. Structuring the story in this way ruins the emotional impact of the scene where Aang finds Gyatso. In the cartoon, he just goes to the temple with Sokka and Katara assuming that his people are alive, and when he finds Gyatso's skeleton, it's genuinely haunting. His reaction is filled with so much raw emotion that the audience can't help but get chills. But in the Netflix version, he already knows that his people are dead before he goes there, so this scene just feels empty. Also, why the fuck is Aang a 3D model? It looks weird. Put him on wires. Jesus Christ. Also, did I mention that in this version of the story, Aang doesn't even run away? Him and Gyatso just have a little heart-to-heart, and then Aang is just like, I'm going to use Appa as a plot device to exposit all of my feelings and thoughts directly to the audience. Then he basically says, I'm going to go for a little drive and clear my head. Then we see the Fire Nation cranking 90s on the air nomads, which is just another excuse for a cool fight scene. Also, Sozin says a corny-ass line, and then they all fly like Iron Man, and it's really funny. Then we cut back to Aang, and we see the storm is getting really bad, and Aang is like, oh man, storm's getting real bad, we should head back home. This is another pointless change, except this one fucks the entire 3-season character arc for Aang. Because him running away from his responsibility is a massive point of guilt for him in the cartoon. It's also a reason for some people blaming him for the rise of the Fire Nation. His insecurity and fear of failure is a driving theme for his character throughout the story, but in this, it's just erased. Not for any particular reason, just because. See what I mean when I say that the writers were not paying attention to the source material? So far, the first episode has managed to take a perfectly paced story and remove all of the good character moments and all of the fun and engaging plot elements and replaced them with action set pieces. Honestly, the writers of this show should pat themselves on the back for making the pilot episode the same length as the first 3, stripping the story of all good character interactions, and making an objectively rushed and poorly paced pilot. How did they even do this? I'm honestly perplexed. Well, that's just the first episode. The rest of the show probably gets its footing and handles the pacing and plot structure a little better, right? No, it gets so much worse. The pacing isn't the only problem in this show. The plot structure is also fucking crazy. If you don't know, the cartoon essentially takes place in the moments during the journey to the group's next destination, with an episode or two dedicated to whatever goal they're trying to accomplish once they get there. Some of the best episodes of the cartoon are the side quests. Avatar is literally the side quest show. The times where they're camping in a strange place, or passing through a town, or going on some crazy spirit journey are the most important moments of the show. These episodes are where the characters' relationships grow, where Aang gradually learns the elements, where awesome new characters are introduced. They're the bread and butter of the show, and the 20-minute episodes work perfectly for this format. So obviously, the Netflix show completely gets rid of all of that and turns the show into a purely plot-driven story with no stops. Well, that's not totally true. They actually just messily mash 100 different small plot lines into the main story in the most unnatural way possible. And this ties back to the batshit insane pacing I mentioned. Sometimes 4 plots are happening at once, and other times the show is dedicating an entire hour-long episode to a 20-minute side plot. To give you an idea of what I mean, episode 3 has Team Avatar heading to Omashu, and yeah, Omashu looks pretty fucking cool. I actually really like it. But that's all the praise this show's getting for a while, because this plot is fucking stupid. In the span of this episode and the next episode, which both take place in Omashu, we get not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 storylines from the original show, all happening at the same fucking time. It's actually hilarious how fast this show is speedrunning. If you want a summation of the insane pacing, I present to you the funniest scene in the entire show. And no, it's not intentionally so.
You're not an airbender.
An airbender? Of course I'm not.
Who cut this scene together? It's so funny. The breakneck pacing of this scene is such a perfect way to show you how this show is made. So in these 2 episodes, we get the Boomy storyline, the fake Air Nomad Fire Nation storyline, the storyline with Jet and the Freedom Fighters, the Tunnel of Two Lovers storyline, and then Zuko is here too for some reason, so I'm counting that as number 5. All of these stories being here results in every single one of them feeling rushed, and that brings up another problem. With the stories they adapt having 0 space in between them, the sense of progression and the passing of time is non-existent. In the first episode, Katara can't waterbend at all. She can barely float one little bubble. But then, because we need to have Katara learn to waterbend so she can ice Jet, we have to speedrun her waterbending training so that she's pretty good by the 3rd episode. So they have Aang just go up to Katara while she's struggling to waterbend, and he just says some generic wise monk shit like, bending requires balance and nature is epic. And then she just learns to waterbend off screen. The way the plot is structured has a very strange effect on how you perceive this show. It legitimately feels like 2 days have passed between the first episode and the 3rd one. And then the 4th episode takes place right from where the 3rd one left off. Then you realize there's only 8 episodes total, and half the season feels like 3 or 4 days have passed. When I got to the end of the season, Katara has the scene where she fights Paku, which strangely kind of sucks despite most of the choreography being pretty good, but I digress. It feels like she went from not knowing how to waterbend to being a master in a week. It's honestly some of the messiest pacing and plot structure I have ever seen, and the whole show has this problem. I would be here for 24 hours straight if I listed off all the terrible plot decisions that this show makes, and as much as I would love to do that, I just can't. My little heart couldn't take it. So now let's talk about the most egregious fuck up this show has to offer. Literally all of the characters. Actually, there's like a couple good things to say. I guess I'll start with those. Dr. Han is perfectly cast as Ozai. He is the best part of the show, but unfortunately he shouldn't be in it yet. Ozai should be shrouded in mystery for most of the show, but instead he's just hanging out for the whole first season. But he's still really cool, so I'll take what I can get. I also think Arden Cho is doing a pretty good job. Not much to say about that, she's just good in the role. Dallas Liu is also putting on a good performance as Zuko, but Zuko isn't enough of a villain in this season. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but he needs to seem completely irredeemable by this point in the show. He's too sympathetic. I also wish he had the same fiery rage as his cartoon counterpart. He comes off a little bit whiny and sad more than angry sometimes. I also don't really like how close him and Iroh are in the beginning of this narrative. Their relationship needs to be more one-sided, or else Zuko betraying him later won't really work. And also, this scene won't hit as hard.
Uncle, I know you must have mixed feelings about seeing me. But I want you to know, I am so sorry, Uncle. I am so sorry and ashamed of what I did. I don't know how I can ever make it up to you, but How can you forgive me so easily? I thought you would be furious with me.
I was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you lost your way.
I did lose my way.
But you found it again. And you did it by yourself. And I'm so happy you found your way here.
It wasn't that hard, Uncle. You have a pretty strong scent.
This scene brings tears to my eyes every single time I watch it. It's fucking beautiful. The actor for Boomy is also doing a really, really good job. Him and Ozai are the only characters in this show who I looked at, heard their voices, and thought, yeah, that's them. This sentiment does not apply to his writing though, because oh my god, Boomy is a terrible character in this show. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, I'm done being nice. Time to get angry. Aang is not even a character in this show. Aang is supposed to be an immature child at the beginning of the story. He's supposed to be childish and fun-loving, but he also has a pure heart. He's a pacifist monk who, despite making immature choices, is in many ways wise beyond his years. He values his friends and any life above everything else, most of the time more than his responsibilities as the Avatar. And despite his inherent strength and his aptitude for learning the elements quickly, he's still afraid. He's not only insecure about failing again, but he's also terrified that he'll have to take a life in order to end the war. Basically what I'm saying is that he's an amazing character with a lot of depth. So this show decided to erase all of that. Yep. His goofy, childish persona is nowhere to be found. He has 3 emotions: happy, sad, and confused. He has no personality anymore. His only dialogue is just exposition, but spoiler alert, this is a problem with every single character. The writers are terrible at incorporating exposition in a natural way. Also, no hate to the actor, but he's just really not doing a good job. It's hard to tell how much of it is just shitty direction and dialogue, but this line delivery is just not very good most of the time. While I'm on topic, let's take a little detour to talk about the acting, directing, and editing. The acting almost across the board seems terrible, but I think that's more of a direction problem. Like, why isn't the director, directing him in this scene?
Right, of course. Just promise me, you'll really stick it to the firebenders. Make them pay. Sokka?
What is this reaction? Shoot that again and tell him what to do. I don't understand. Also, the editing in this show is really strange. That hilarious scene I showed earlier is a great example, but there are too many to count. The show is littered with scenes that cut off too early or scenes that linger for a really awkward amount of time. Like, look at the dialogue and editing in this scene.
You're a real waterbender, Katara.
You know, you should be practicing too. The Avatar needs to master all 4 elements.
Maybe later.
I can't imagine what it's like, knowing you'll have to save the world. But avoiding practice doesn't mean you'll avoid the responsibility.
I know. It's just, Gyatso used to be the one who trained me. Never really trained with anyone else.
It's okay. We'll do this together. We're not going anywhere. Or you could just let me use you for target practice.
Why does it linger for so long, and why did George Lucas write this dialogue? I don't know, it's just weird. It's kind of hard to show you, but you will notice it if you watch the show. There's also a lot of distracting visual effects, mainly due to the fact that a lot of this show is green screen. They use this super intense depth of field in like every shot, and it just looks very distracting. They also use 3D models a lot. There's multiple scenes where Aang is very clearly a 3D model, and he's just animated kind of unnaturally. There's also this weird shot in the last episode where this random guy is a 3D model for a really long scene. Just kind of a strange decision. These issues were definitely surprising to me considering the fact that Netflix came out with One Piece live action not too long ago, and the green screen use felt almost non-existent in that show. When they did use green screen, which I'm sure they did, it was hidden so well that you never noticed it. They also built all of these massive and intricate sets, which gave the show a very grounded and real feeling. I really wish they did the same thing in this show. Anyway, Aang is an empty character, and I'm very disappointed. I already talked about Katara earlier, and there's not really much more to say. The flawed, complex, and powerful character that she was in the original has been replaced by a husk. The actress is doing her best, but she is given zero material to work with. That's pretty much it. Now we get to talk about Sokka. This is an interesting one, because Sokka is actually the reason I went from being excited for this show to dreading its arrival almost immediately. When the first trailers were released and the internet was buzzing, an interview came out. And in this interview, the writers said that they would be fixing Sokka, that they would be removing his sexist character traits. I saw this, and I told my friends, hey guys, this show's gonna be bad. Like, really bad. Because once again, the writers misunderstand the source material. Yes, Sokka is sexist in the beginning of the original show, for 2 episodes. His sexism comes from his immaturity and the insurmountable responsibility that he's left with after his mother is killed by the Fire Nation and his dad leaves to go fight in the war. He's essentially overcompensating to get over his fear of failing not only his father, but also his people. This concept is built on later in the show when he reconnects with his dad. He's terrified they won't accept him, that they'll think he's not good enough, that he's just a kid. But none of that happens. Not only are they ecstatic to see him, they treat them like he's one of them. His dad even passes off the torch to Sokka when he gets injured in battle, putting him in charge of the entire army. This is another thing that Netflix gets wrong. We see a flashback in the Spirit World episode of Koda shit-talking Sokka behind his back. He calls him weak and says that he doesn't have what it takes to be a soldier. Sokka overhears him, and so his insecurity doesn't come from the overwhelming burden of his responsibility. It comes from words that his dad actually said. Regardless, the cartoon resolves the sexism arc in the 2nd episode, where Sokka is a complete dick to the Kyoshi warriors. That is, until he gets the shit kicked out of him and he realizes he was wrong. He then begs the Kyoshi warriors to train him. It's called character development, and the idea that the show pushing a message of sexism is bad by using a character who's shown to be in the wrong is a problematic thing that needs to be erased is the core of why this show failed. Because now, Sokka just has no character traits. He's just the funny, stupid guy with daddy issues. There's no growth and there's no message. And even more ironic, they also removed all of Suki's character traits too. Her only character trait, if you can even call it that, is liking Sokka. That seems a little sexist. I don't know, maybe that's just me. The actor for Sokka is once again doing a fine job, but this George Lucas-ass dialogue makes every actor look awful. This isn't Sokka, and I'm disappointed. Uncle Iroh is a character that I'm sort of torn about. On one hand, I kinda like Iroh in this show, but on the other hand, cartoon Iroh is one of my favorite characters ever. The Netflix version of Iroh is very different from cartoon Iroh, and I think that mostly comes from the performance. He's much less laid back and relaxed, and he gets a little more involved in Zuko's story on his own terms. The cartoon has Iroh basically following Zuko around, letting him make his own mistakes, and acting as his moral compass along the way. While the Iroh and Zuko relationship in the Netflix version is one of the few things that was written well, it doesn't totally sit right with me that Iroh is so proactive in the story. He directly helps and makes suggestions in Zuko's search for the Avatar, which seems out of character. In the beginning of the cartoon, Iroh seems like a lazy old man who doesn't really give a shit what his nephew does. But you realize that he's trying to let Zuko find his own path. But his reluctance to involve himself in Zuko's obsessive journey also comes from the fact that he doesn't think capturing the Avatar is the right thing. He just wants Zuko to realize that for himself. He just helps Zuko a little bit too much in this version of the story, in my opinion. And as nice as the scene of Zuko consoling his uncle after the death of his son is, it just shouldn't be shown this early in the story. It's okay to set up moments for later. We don't need the payoff now. Because if the payoff always immediately follows the setup, we have nothing to look forward to. That's just basic storytelling. The slow trickle of information about Iroh and his past in the cartoon makes him so much more compelling. When we finally get all of the information and the wound is still fresh, we get this scene.
Happy birthday, my son. If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile, tiny shells drifting in the foam. Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy comes marching home.
This is another scene that makes me tear up every time I see it. This is how you build a character. Anyway, Iroh isn't really bad in this show. I actually kind of like him, but unfortunately he's still a downgrade. Alright, let's talk about Momo and Appa. Appa's fine. I like his design. Momo has a great design too. He's super cute, but he makes stock monkey sound effects. Why? You had one job. He goes... Not... What the fuck, dude? Sorry. Zuko's okay. I'm mostly fine with him. Like I said before, he's too sympathetic, but that'll become more of a problem down the road. I also hate that he actually fights back during his Agni Kai with Ozai and that he almost wins. First of all, I don't buy it. Second of all, him losing wasn't what got him banished. Him refusing to fight is. He dishonored his father by surrendering. It's a pretty important moment for the character and an important insight into how heartless and brutal Ozai is. Just another pointless change that only detracts from the story, even if just a little. Azula shouldn't be here. Also, what was the point of introducing Mei and Ty Lee? They just hang out and do nothing. It makes no sense. The main problem with Azula is that she isn't a character that we should feel bad for. She's a fucking maniac with a god complex. She wasn't abused by her father. She looked up to him. She is easily the fiercest and most obsessively disciplined bender in the entire show. And that's what makes her so scary. Seeing her unravel in the end is interesting because we see that she has insecurity and trust issues due to her tendency to use fear to control people instead of building real relationships. This is the first glimpse we see of that in the cartoon.
The thing I don't understand is why? Why would you do it? You know the consequences.
I guess you just don't know people as well as you think you do. You miscalculated. I love Zuko more than I fear you.
No, you miscalculated! You should have feared me more!
Seeing the cold, calculated, and disciplined character lose her shit because she can't control other people is incredibly interesting. And showing her being all sad and angry and emotional this early completely ruins that. Not to mention the fact that she would not defy Ozai. He's the only person who she puts above herself. She's supposed to be the narrative opposite of Zuko. Zuko is an unstable, angry wreck, but Azula is suppressing all of her feelings so deep down that she doesn't even really know they exist. Zuko comes to terms with his inner turmoil and tames it. Azula pretends it doesn't exist and it swallows her whole. These two scenes are all you need to understand this dichotomy.
For so long I thought that if my dad accepted me, I'd be happy. I'm back home now. My dad talks to me. He even thinks I'm a hero. Everything should be perfect, right? I should be happy now. But I'm not. I'm angrier than ever and I don't know why.
There's a simple question you need to answer then. Who are you angry at?
No one. I'm just angry.
Yeah. Who are you angry at, Zuko?
Everyone. I don't know.
Is it Dad?
No.
Your uncle?
Me?
No.
Then who? Who are you angry at?
Answer the question, Zuko.
Talk to us.
Come on, answer the question.
Come on, answer it.
I'm angry at myself!
Why?
Because I'm confused. Because I'm not sure I know the difference between right and wrong anymore.
Well, yes, I guess you're right. I don't have sob stories like all of you. I could sit here and complain how our mom liked Zuko more than me, but I don't really care. My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt.
Not all villains need to have a redemption arc, and Azula is at the top of that list. Remember how I said the actor who played Bumi is doing a great job? Unfortunately, it's not enough to save the character from the terrible writing and plot restructuring of this show. In the cartoon, Bumi is basically a goofy kid in the body of a 100-year-old man. The story is structured around the fact that neither Aang nor the audience know that Bumi is Aang's friend from the past, and it makes sense once the episode is played out. He threatens Aang's friends and forces Aang to play Squid Game in exchange for their lives. The last Squid Game challenge is just one question. What is my name? Once Aang figures it out, he realizes that Sokka and Katara were never actually in any danger, and it leads to a very tender moment. It shouldn't be surprising at this point, but the show handles this entire plotline in a really stupid way, with a lot of the writers' trademark pointless changes. Bumi captures Aang, and Aang figures out who Bumi is like the second he sees him. And they do all the classic lines and setup from the original episode, but this time it just makes no sense, because Bumi is acting like his cartoon counterpart in the beginning, but then he chastises Aang for abandoning the world. This doesn't work for two reasons. One, it ruins Bumi's childlike carefree persona and clashes with the way we've seen him act in this show. And two, Aang didn't run away in this version of the story. It actually wasn't his fault. So then Bumi tries to murder Aang with a giant boulder, character assassination. Then Katara and Sokka appear from the depths of their other plot line to save him, and the episode rushes to a stupid conclusion. Bumi got it really bad here, and it really disappoints me that they wasted such good casting and such a fun plotline. Also, they fucked up Ko the Face Stealer, like really, really badly. The idea of this malevolent spirit who steals the face of anyone who shows him emotion is so fucking creepy and original and creative, and it leads to this super tense and entertaining scene where Aang has to try not to show any emotion while learning all of this important information. Ko's existence is shoved into the adaptation of the Spirit World episode, and he kidnaps Katara and Sokka. In this version, he just takes people who get lost in the spirit fog to his creepy cave where he eats them. But he makes sure to give Aang enough time to hang out with Ghost Gyatso for a while, leave the Spirit World, fly all the way to Roku's shrine in the Fire Nation on his glider, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't even feel like opening, talk to Roku, who's a complete goofball in this show for some reason, grab a MacGuffin, and fly all the way back to give it to Ko. Also, the Spirit of the Forest is still in this episode. If they want Ko to be here this early in the story, why not just make him the only one terrorizing the villagers? It would make way more sense that way. The Spirit of the Forest never even turns back into a panda. They just get attacked by him and he's never shown again after that. Wow, Aang, not very Avatar-like to abandon this tormented spirit in its time of need. That was like the entire point of the original episode, showing that the Avatar doesn't restore balance only through fighting and violence. It's a really good way of showcasing Aang's personality as well as conveying directly that the Avatar is a bridge between the physical and spirit world. He literally brings balance to both worlds by resolving the conflict between the village and the forest spirit and bringing them back together. The only episode of this show that I'm pretty much fine with is the finale, but that's mainly because it's just a big action climax. It's the only episode in the show that's pretty faithful to the source material, but it still has some strange issues, one of them being Pakku and Aang. Pakku expected Aang to have mastered all of the elements already, which is fair enough. He had no way of knowing what Aang's situation was, but what doesn't make sense is his response to this information. Pakku was like, hey, you're our biggest asset since you know all the elements, and Aang is like, actually, and then Pakku was like, oh, never mind. And then he's walking away, talking to someone, and he's just like, damn, so I guess the Avatar is completely useless, unlucky. Then the Fire Nation immediately shows up because this show is allergic to good pacing, and Aang never learns waterbending. I mean it. Aang never waterbends in the entirety of Book 1, Water. Aang also sides with Pakku when he tells Katara she can't fight because she's a girl, which is just so insanely out of character for Aang. Shit, they took away Sokka's sexism and gave it to Aang. Why the fuck did they do that? And then Katara never learns to waterbend from Pakku at all. She just fights in the final battle, and at the end Pakku is like, damn, I guess you didn't even need me. You became your own master. Huh? They play this off like a girl boss moment, but it just doesn't make any sense. Katara in the cartoon is an amazing waterbender, one of the best, but she didn't get to that point by reading a scroll and practicing basic forms off screen. She had to be taught. She learned incredibly quickly, faster than any of Pakku's other students, including Aang, but she still had to learn. There's no shame in Katara having to learn to waterbend from a master. It's an ancient martial art, not silly water magic. Whatever. It doesn't even matter. I could go on and on about my issues with this show. Every single episode is filled with shit that makes my eyes roll, but at the end of the day, the main issue is the studio. As is increasingly common these days, studio tampering seems to be a big reason for this show being as bad as it is. I'm still of the belief that this show never could have been very good, purely because of the perfection of the source material and the inevitable comparisons that would come from that. But there's a world where this show is much less offensive than it ended up being. Between COVID delays, studio expectations, and the writers of the cartoon jumping ship, it's honestly a miracle this show even came out. But anyway, who cares? We're getting season 2 and 3. Yeah, baby. Oh, and they showed Azula taking over Omashu at the end, ruining another big reveal just for a cheap cliffhanger. Wow, I can't wait for the next season. This is my fault for hate watching. I did this. God damn it. If you're still watching, I greatly appreciate it. I'm still very new to YouTube and specifically editing, so I've been trying to get a little more ambitious with each new video, so hopefully it paid off. Like and subscribe, and definitely leave a comment if you have a differing opinion. I really like the discussion that comes from that sort of thing. So yeah. Okay, bye.